Here we are reminded of the long history of people coming together to find strength, to express their grief, and to rise in hope no matter the challenges they face. Lamenting is often described as a prayer or a song that gives voice to deep emotions, emotions that are hard to articulate but need to be heard. It's a powerful practice. There's no better place to engage in it than in the body of Christ. Tonight we bring our full range of feelings, whether that be joy, anger, sorrow, or a sense of confusion. And in this space, we acknowledge that we are not alone in these emotions. We're honored to have with us tonight some community leaders who are here to listen and help us process the grief and the uncertainty many of us may be feeling. Representative Harold Love, City Councilwoman Sandy Ewing, Bishop Aaron Marble of IMF are not just here to speak, but to hear us, to walk with us through this time, and to help us to understand how we can take the next steps together. As we share tonight, let us remember the words of Vice President Kamala Harris, who said in her concession speech today, "While we concede the race, we don't concede the work." Yes, we are here to reflect, to grieve, and to express what we're feeling. But we're also here to commit to the work ahead. This conversation is not just about sharing what's on our hearts, but about planning, organizing, and finding our way forward, because the work continues. And we have a role in shaping the future of our community and our nation. Thank you for being here tonight, for being part of this sacred space, and for being a part of this important conversation. Let us take time to listen deeply, to support one another, and to begin the work of healing and moving forward together. Welcome those of you who are in the sanctuary and those of you who are in the virtual space. Thank you for being here. I want to ask City Councilwoman Sandy Ewing to open with some remarks.
Hi, everyone. So thanks for having me. My family, the Ewings, have been part of this church for quite some time. I feel honored to be part of the community here. I hate to say that this morning, even though I was deeply sad and disappointed, I wasn't necessarily surprised, and I hated that. I hated waking up to what I thought I'd wake up to. I was so hoping that it would be different. So probably like many people, I shed some tears, and then I started getting angry. And I wrote to my daughter, who's 18. She just is a freshman at UNC. She's full of promise. She's full of hope and the legacy of her family, both sides. Just kind of an interesting legacy to carry. But what I wanted to tell her was that when you get knocked down, you don't just lie there. You dust yourself off. You get up and you support people who are more vulnerable. You don't leave anyone behind, and you try and just keep doing the work. Because I wanted her to know that even in her disappointment, she and we cannot give up. We don't have that luxury. And, you know, speaking specifically for my family, we're a family that is very fortunate. We have been given a lot, and to those who a lot is given, a lot needs to be expected, and we need to bring it. So that's where my head is. I came here mostly to listen, so I'm going to stop talking and let you speak. And we did not color coordinate, although.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Bishop Marvel, if you would, in your introductory comments, if you would just kind of shape for us where we are as a community here in Nashville in relationship to what has happened nationally.
First, thank you, Dr. Scott, for the invitation and for the vision to open the doors of this sacred space, that there would be a spot tonight for conversation and for dialogue and for prayer. So thank you for that. And particularly being relatively new to the city and leading in this initiative, we appreciate you for that. I think to center the moment for me, my wife went to sleep last night before the race was called. And she woke up this morning to the news that Donald Trump won. And she began crying. We have two daughters. And she began crying because she said he's only defeated women, both of whom were overqualified, well qualified. And it seems as if this was a reminder to her, and then in a way, how do we raise our daughters to wrestle with the reality that even when you are clearly more competent, more skilled, more able, it may not turn out how you would expect it to because of the isms that we face in our country. I think for Nashville, we are living in the reality of Trump's movement. If we rewind to the states, our state legislatures attempt to really run havoc and dominate Nashville politics, we feel what it's like to live in a Trump-led government. To have the will of the people bulldozed because it opposed the supermajority's ideals and objectives. We know what that's like. We know what it's like with our COB. We had that conversation here several months ago. We know what it was like to have our council challenged, its size challenged, its scope challenged because of Nashville's Democratic base. We know what it's like to feel gerrymandering because our county has been sliced in a way that is not representative of Nashville. And now we do not have any representation federally as a blue city in this deep red state. So some of the things that we have felt as it relates to a lack of gun control, as it relates to hearing that our legislator would even consider rejecting federal funds of education so it doesn't have to comply with federal regulations. I think it was Justin Jones who said, if you want to see Project 2025 in action, look at Tennessee in 2024. And so I think we feel and live in what the nation is going to begin to experience in ways that it has not yet.
Thank you. Representative Reverend Dr. Harold Love is with us. Doc, if you would, in your introductory comments, really help us to understand the importance of the Black church in response to yesterday's election.
Sure. Thank you first for the invitation and for making the space for this conversation. Thank you for those who have come out. I think one of the challenges we have to grapple with is the relaxing of our energy post civil rights and black president elected. My father served in the State House from 1968 to 1994 in Tennessee, and I remind folks that in that time, he and others like Lois D. Berry and Charles Robinson, C.B. Robinson, and Thelma Harper, they were fighting, and Avon Williams, they were fighting for personhood. Literally, there are documented newspaper articles of how the Black Caucus got formed was that white Democratic representatives would not speak to the black Democratic representatives in the hallway. So the black Democrats one day voted with the white Republicans and got the attention of the black Democrats. And that's how the Black Caucus was formed, because they demonstrated the connection. But it was birthed out of their relationship with the black church and knowing that they had to be engaged with clergy to help rectify the problems in the political realm. And I think once we got past that larger hump of visible discrimination and were able to have some rights gained, it's like driving your car, right? Once you get to the top of the hill, so to speak, you take your foot off the gas and you cruise on down, but you forget there's another hill. And I think that's where we're finding difficulty, because the activism that we used to engage in collectively is not there. And when we try to restart it, we had to knock some of the dust off and some of the cobwebs off and oil the gears of the mechanism in order to get it going the right way.
Thank you. Thank you for those remarks. So listen, I stayed away from the news yesterday, stayed away from social media, and woke up this morning to the reality that Donald Trump had been elected president of these yet-to-be United States of America. And what has concerned me, and I think that, I'm going to begin this lamenting session, if you would permit me. What has concerned me is that this woman, who happened to be black, was overly, she's the only candidate who's ever served in all three branches of government. Overly qualified. And when I look at the numbers of who voted for Donald Trump, 74% of white men, 69% of white women, 16% of black men, 8% of black women, 45% Latino men, 40% of Latino women, and 55% other. The number says that overwhelmingly this country said that we will elect one who is underqualified, a convicted felon, a sex offender, over a woman who is qualified has, one of my friends is going to get me for saying this. I say she had no scandal. My friend says she had one scandal. She was in a relationship with a man who was still married. He was separated from his wife. They had been separated a long time. I just, we can debate that. But this woman's background was clean. And this country made a decision that it would elect a man who clearly showed us who he was. Remember January 6th? Today, there was no rioting, no fires, no breach of the Capitol. It is painful to see where we are. Bishop Marble talked about his wife, his children. Where do we go from here?
Pastor, if I can, I want to go to what I think Bishop Marble was speaking about earlier about the presence of Project 2025 here in Tennessee already and other parts of the country. In Tennessee, to my knowledge, we've only had one female Speaker of the House. And that was Beth Harwell. And it took her navigating those treacherous waters to get to that place, and haven't had one since.
And she was a white woman.
Correct. Right? And a Republican, right? Speaker Pro Tem DeBerry should have been Speaker at some point in her illustrious career, but never was given the chance. And so what you see happening in a lot of southern states is what happened last night. Right? We have 7 black speakers of houses, and they're all in the North, right? So you're talking about a situation where these things that are happening in Tennessee and Florida and Georgia and South Carolina, and my concern, though, is that at one point in time, we could at least say they were in the former Confederate states, right? It was in Florida and South Carolina and Texas, but now the spread is to Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. So I think it's a wake-up call for people to stop with the election day emphasis only and really talk about, and I think Bishop Marble and I have worked on this with African American clergy, get to the place where it is normalized for black folks to come to the city council meeting, the school board meeting, the state legislature, to be there and to hear what's going on. Because even in the debate around gun reform, there were very few black faces down there. Very few. And so this is where we got, talking about where do we go, what do we do? That's one thing we have to do. We have to get to the space where we normalize at least some bodies, right? Come down there and observe and listen and find out, well, what's going on? Why is this going on? And also celebrate the good things that may be going on down there.
Earl Fisher, pastor of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, remixes a Malcolm X quote. And he says, Earl Fisher says it this way: everything south of Canada is Mississippi. And that we have been lured to sleep in that white supremacy is a Southern illness. White supremacy is an American illness. And white supremacy does not just demonize and other black people, but it demonizes in others everybody that's not a white man. And so I love spades. There's some Jefferson Street people here. We love playing spades. And the big joker in American politics is being white and male. And we see that happen with Donald Trump, point blank, period. And regardless of the other qualifications of the candidates, that Trump card, that big joker, is what allowed him to have victory. And I think the other piece that I have concern with, and Dr. Love and I are colleagues and work together, is I don't know how much more black people have to do. I certainly think there is there might be a lack of tenacity, as we saw from some of our foreparents. But as the exit polls show, black folk did what they needed to do at the poll. While we might have had some ideological issues, in particularly with black men as it related to Vice President Harris, we see that even if we had 100%, based on who voted, it still would not have been enough to turn the tide. And so at some point, I think, yes, we have responsibility. Yes, there is more we can do. But at some point, it's a wake-up call to the other human beings in our nation to say, this can't be just our fight.
Yes, sir. I 1,000% echo what you just said. I've been thinking a lot about the role of white people in this fight our country is in. So a couple things. I'm not a politician. I decided to get involved in politics because Roe v. Wade got torn down. And regardless of how you feel about that particular issue, the point that I was trying to make by getting involved is that we need normal, regular, everyday people of any color to be involved, to participate. To your point, we need the faces. We need people to participate on every level, whether it's in political office or it's coming to those political spaces to tell your elected officials what you need, what you want, what they need to bring to the table for you and your life and your families. The other thing is that it's not enough anymore to be a white ally and cast your vote and think you've done your thing. That's not enough. And so what I meant when we were talking earlier is that there needs to be a deeper dialogue where those white allies go out and into the white community and try and have those uncomfortable conversations like the ones we have in the unconscious bias classes that like Vanderbilt held, where you're required to dig deeper. You're required to look at what your own biases look like, and you're required to tear them down and pick them apart so that you can understand what they are, why they are, and you can take them and put them away. So I think the white community has a lot to do. I think that allies have been a little bit asleep at the wheel, thinking, we're the good guys. We're on the right side of history, and thinking that that's enough. But to be really on the right side of history, we have to act in a deeper, more intentional way. That's my feeling on it.
Thank you. And so with that being said, asking our white friends, our allies, to be much more intentional, I think the question then becomes, how do we begin to shape organizing? And so in the basement of this church, not necessarily this building, but of this church, the sit-ins were born, and there were allies And not only were there allies, but there were also obstructionists. There were black folk who said, y'all shouldn't be doing that. You know, y'all should be quiet. We don't want that. There were leaders in the church who thought that the pastors should not have been having such conversations. But nevertheless, the sit-ins were able to make a difference. And so perhaps we need to get back to those kinds of organizing efforts, freedom schools that are happening in churches, where not only adults are being trained, but young people are being trained to advocate for themselves around issues that are that are important. My 14-year-old daughter asked last night at dinner, so what will happen if I get pregnant and I have a child that I can't carry full term? Will I go to jail? And then she says, Daddy, do you know someone who will be able to get me out? So how do we educate? Where do we go from here? We've done some talking. I want to now invite you all to talk a little bit. I'd like to pause the system while folk are at the microphone just for a few moments. Those of you who are watching will come back, but we want to give folk who are here freedom to just kind of speak their piece. If you are virtual and you'd like to share with a question or a comment, if you would just put it in the comment section, we will share it. We're monitoring it. But we want to give folk a safe space to speak. So we're going to pause the system just for a moment. Let me open the floor.
And yes, the House and the Senate. We look at the state of Tennessee. It is what it is. It's very red. And then I know Pastor Scott, you read the numbers. I saw similar numbers. I saw where I think 21% of black males voted for Donald Trump. A lot of the Latino community voted for Donald Trump. A lot of women voted for Trump. So I think we really, and this is, because I'm with you guys. I think that America the gun advocates say, thoughts and prayers. But there are no action behind the thoughts and prayers. So I actually believe that you have a lot of, people, black men, Latinos, women, all these groups who are thirsty for policy, and you had a candidate who talked about some policy, talked about inflation, talked about putting more money in your pockets, and there was no real response to that. But if you vote for this person over here, Project 25 is going to happen. Grocery store sucks. The last community that I lived in here in Nashville, it was a food desert, and we were 15 minutes away from downtown. And all my neighbors in my last community looked like me. And right now, in our beautiful community that we live in right now, most of my neighbors look like me. And again, we can't even get fresh fruit and produce and I think you know what I'm talking about. Sure. So the point of it is, yes, I think that we should demand more as constituents. And whether if that's a sit-in, if that's, going up to the Capitol, going up to, the historic courthouse, and really demanding more of our elected officials, we should do that. But I also think that the party and those at the top should really pay attention and really consider this a wake-up call. I would have thought that 2016 would have been the wake-up call. But at this point, I don't know how much damage is going to be done. Courtney and I, we're newly married, and as we talk about having kids, I don't want to send my kid to a school where they're going to whitewash the history. And that's a scary thought for me. I'm going to stop right there for right now.
I want to speak to his question and also pick back up on what you asked me about the black church. Ronnie Glenn, state representative in District 67 in Clarksville. Clarksville's population is 167,000 people. The black percentage is 23%. Ronnie Glenn's election last night, here are the numbers. 11,061 people voted for Ronnie Glenn. 10,920 voted for his opponent. For me, this is how we have to respond, it doesn't make sense that in a city where you have a growing black population, that we allow ourselves to only have 11,000 people to turn out in a contested race. Because in order for us to affect policy at the federal level, we have to start affecting it at the local level. If you have 11,000 people turning out for a black state rep in Clarksville, who I asked, I said, where are the preachers? He said, they're not organized. I said, well, black preachers in Clarksville aren't organized around getting the vote out. So you got Ronnie Glenn, first African-American elected from Clarksville, who was in jeopardy of losing his seat because the black church was not organizing a concerted effort to put aside whatever differences they got and say, this one right here we're going to keep. And when you do that, what happens is you have those small pockets. Now you have the organization. Senator Oliver is right when she says, we're not a red state, we just don't vote.
Do you think part of that is that we've been asleep at the wheel and we need some sort of remedial training?
No, it goes back to what Pastor Scott's saying about the training, right? So we have to connect people with how government is actually involved in their life. We have to educate, right? We have to educate the students to understand, okay, if you want to open a business, you need a business license. And that's done through a government entity. If you want those barriers to open your business to be removed, right, you have to vote for a person who's going to do that. Connect with them how government affects their life in every day. I had a conversation with some students just recently, and that's where they go through the process of showing them how it connects them. Then they get, because what happens is those of us who are a little bit older, we understand that it affects our lives with retirement and Social Security and other things.
I just want to speak to several things that were just said. Representative Harold and I had this conversation last week about Representative Ronnie Glenn. His first term, he won by a very small margin, almost 100 votes. Last night, almost 400 votes. The black church is not organized in Clarksville, being there for a couple years. Black people in Clarksville have migrated there from here due to affordability. And we get up on Sunday morning and come to church in Nashville, because this is where we are from. My church home is Temple on Kings Lane. Drive 52 minutes to get to church. There are not a lot of black churches in Clarksville. And can we just speak to Tennessee not being a voting state, how many people live here and go back home to vote? Because I know a lot of people who won't change their driver's license because they from 313 and they go back home every election to vote. They pay taxes here, but they go vote in Michigan. That's part of the problem. Not to say that, hey, people are committing voting fraud because they vote in another state where they don't live, but that has a lot to do with the numbers here.
And I love the church. I am a product of the black church through and through. My childhood, I probably spent more time in church than I did at my house. But I think part of our reality has to be that the church does not carry the same weight with current generations as it does with older generations. And we've got to be honest about it. That doesn't mean the church doesn't have influence. It just means we've got to be realistic about how that influence operates. So for instance, the Southern Movement Committee, which has done an excellent job at reaching younger demographics in our county, is hosting their town hall at Jefferson Street. It partners the legacy of the Black church, the safety, the refuge of the building, with new momentum of younger folk. And I think part of our organizational issues in certain places, our church relational issues in certain places, is that there are some interpersonal dynamics, generationally, culturally, in our own stuff that we haven't completely ironed out, that helps create conflict within our generations. For example, I'm 36. 25-year-old males are gonna walk into church with a hat on. They gonna do it. I didn't. I won't. But, and I'm using this as a small example, most church folk will snatch them up at the door and tell them to pull their hat off before you come into church. And at Jefferson Street, I've trained, plead with people, don't say nothing to them. Let them wear what they're gonna wear, come out, because if we don't, we're gonna fail to reach and blend. And I think part of our church strategy has to be leverage the influence we have and partner and collaborate with organizations that do better than we do in 2024 freedom school training. It needs to happen, but maybe we host it, but we aren't the teacher, you know. And I think that's part of it.
I think, as you're coming to the mic, but I think that as I'm integrating and assimilating into this community, to hear that folk are driving from a place like Clarksville, and folk are living here and not voting here, means that the county clerk has some responsibility, that we ought to be engaging people in the process and asking people. Voting records are public information. And so why not go to them and say, now listen, we noticed that you didn't vote in the last 2 or 3 elections. We'd like to have a conversation with you, particularly as a black community. We'd like to have a conversation with you about why we think you should be engaged in the voting process. And let them say to us, here are some things that I'd like you to focus on, right? Because if they don't think that their engagement or involvement in the voting process here matters, then they are going to go to a place like Detroit that is being, blasted.
And I think education helps with that. I'm from Flint, so I'll say that, like, if you are living here and have Michigan or let's say Pennsylvania or Georgia, you're thinking, let me keep voting there because it's more of a battleground than Tennessee, to the point being Tennessee might be purple if, we don't know what those numbers necessarily may be, but I think there might be a genuine reason, but to your point, a re-education needed to help curb that.
I think that's where driving home the importance of the local level comes in. It's a huge deal, and this is where we can all make the biggest impact at the local level. The national level elections are really important as well, but the local level, to have someone win by 400 votes after winning by 100 votes, I mean, that's, if we had a get out the vote that was successful, we could easily turn that seat. So.
Yes, I'd love to bring it back to education, because one of the things from the demographics that some people have already shared this evening that was shared a lot last night was the number of people who voted for Donald Trump who either don't have anything beyond a high school education, and I definitely don't want to prioritize that a college education is is somehow part of your worth or anything like that. But I do think it speaks to the fact that Donald Trump himself said that he loves the uneducated, and we saw that people who somehow self-identified as not having a college education or something like that voted for him. And I think that speaks to what you were saying, this gentleman over here, about I don't think he really spoke policy, but he said things that they wanted to hear, at least I think. But how do we educate people when our own legislature is removing things from the curriculum that affect everybody? I mean, they're removing a lot of things about Black history, but that affects everybody. That is detrimental to everybody, especially Black culture, but everybody. And so with some elected officials here and some other faith leaders here, how do we make sure that our young people are educated, and not just in traditional whiteness ways, but like about, I think somebody was saying, I was checking my phone, some election results, but applying for business licenses, things like that. These things that we educate kids about too. I'd love to hear just us pull that conversation in.
2014, Governor Bill Haslam put together a program called Drive to 55. It was designed to have 55% of Tennessee's population with either a associate's or college degree by 2020. He said a 10-year goal. I think the education process has to be measurable and have a time on it. The thing we do wrong to ourselves is we think that next year's election, we're going to get them, right? And we only spend 6 months with it. Tamika does a great job with trying to get folks geared up and ready, but most candidates, I would venture to say, who are new to the office running, or folks who want to reach people, don't start but maybe a year out, right? Right, and so what would it look like for us to have a long-range plan to say, all right, in Nashville, Tennessee, it's 2024. In Nashville, Tennessee, we want to, by the time we get to the 2030 census, which gives us 6 years, right, to educate people enough so that however they draw the congressional lines, we'll have a group of folks who are educated and engaged by that time on what to do. But instead what we do is we run on a 2-year cycle or a 4-year if we're looking at Metro Council. And I think that's part of the problem with the education process, is that nothing against any of the organizations, but they're all going to disengage. We're all going to disengage. I'm going to disengage. We're all, because we're lamenting now, but we got to re-engage soon and have a measurable goal. Otherwise, we can't say. It should be a situation where it's okay now, maybe we're going to have 2 education sessions between November 2024 and November 2025.
Also, what would it look like instead of us talking about superheroes for Vacation Bible School, that we begin to talk about civics, right? I mean, we're running around here talking about Batman and Robin for Vacation Bible School when we really should be talking about voting and John Lewis and Kelly Miller Smith and Mary Lafayette and what that means for us. So perhaps education is not just, in the academy, but perhaps we should be creating spaces
Absolutely.
where we are teaching whosoever will what it means, what it means to be a citizen down here, and that it is not just pie in the sky, but let's have a slice down here on earth.
Well, and honestly, you know, to the earlier point about not having Black history taught, not having like chunks of our history presented to kids at all ages, that is a huge problem, and one that we have to maybe work in a clever way to counteract. One thing that I was taught when I came onto council, pretty much everything was new to me. They did some sort of remedial training for us where they brought us through all the steps of like, what's your toolbox? What can you do as a council person? What can you not do as a council person? One of the things that they brought up was, here's the list of all of the laws that council has tried to pass that have been preempted by the state level. And they said, we're not trying to make you feel depressed or downtrodden or like you can't do anything. What we're trying to point out to you is that if you want to go after some of these issues, you're gonna have to find really clever workarounds, and you're gonna have to work at it and be smarter and do the long game and have a strategy. And so I think that that's what we need. We need a strategy, we need a long game, we need other avenues for this education, like Pastor Scott talked about, like the Emerge program, for example. I was lucky enough to have Frida Player take me into her Emerge Tennessee program. She is the one who is responsible for me being in council, because she gave me my toolbox. She reached out a hand and she taught me what I needed to know. We need to reach out that hand in all sorts of ways in our civic life and our religious life to give people the tools that they need that they're not getting at public school, because we've had the state legislature say, we're gonna take those books away. You know, we're gonna just do this, and if we do this, it doesn't exist. Well, we need to make sure these kids know it exists.
Yeah. I say creativity. One of the ministries of Jefferson Street that came out of book banning was every Sunday school opens with a moment in Black history. And that has fueled an education for people. And secondly, I sit on the board of the Meharry and Vanderbilt Alliance. And one research project that students created was to do HIV and sexual health education in barber and beauty salons for an African American community. And what it proved and showed is that these conversations were happening in barbershops and beauty salons. So let's train and equip people where the conversation is happening to have the tools and skills to be able to facilitate it in a good way. And I think, to your point, we might have to have conversation of how do we train the trainer, and where do we train the trainer to be agents of this type of civic education, so that those that may not come through the doors of our churches still have been touched by the desire to do this type of creative education.
Okay. I'm going to step back just a little bit at the very beginning, where Pastor gave some quotes on how many people were voting for Latinos, Black men, Black women, white women. My problem is, and I talked to a lot of Black men during this last election, and some of them said, I'm not going to vote. What with the classes, we need to go ahead, I agree with that, get those Black men in first, because those are the ones that said, and those are the ones that did not come out to vote. You know, so let's get those Black men out there to vote, get them into the churches, and teach them within the churches, teach them within schools and communities that they are going to go forward. And they said, well, my voice is not going to be heard, but it is. If you don't vote, it's heard. It's going over to the other side. God bless.
Thank you. We have a comment online. What I would like to say is that I heard and that I'm grateful for this gathering, for all of us who are hurt, disappointed, confounded, etc., just to have a chance to air out our thoughts. Today was difficult, and yet I found 2 points of light and connection with people. One lady at Walmart, one at Michael's. They were kind, patient, and helpful. I can be kind, patient, and helpful as I intentionally put myself and my energies toward treating people the way I want to be treated. Didn't Jesus say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Is this my starting point of establishing goodwill? Can goodwill count as being a force for change? I choose to think that it can. I don't disagree with her. Thank you for that comment. I do think that being kind is what makes the difference. And one of the things that I argued throughout this election was that I didn't believe that this election was as much about Democrat and Republican as it had been in previous cycles. That I believe that this election was really about goodness. That our presidential nominee, what is he now? He's the president-elect. That he's just not a good person. That he's just nasty and vile and wicked and just no good. Just a few days ago, he called the vice president out of her name. He's just a bad person. And I think that while we may not be able to do anything about him being a bad person, that we can be good people. Right? That we can be kind to one another, and that we can insist that if you're going to deal with me, that you're going to be kind to me as I am to you. And so thank you for that comment. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Salita Holloway, and I'm a former Metro Council member. One thing about me is I don't like going to meetings, and that's pretty much my job. But I don't like it, and so I don't like it going even after work, you know. But something you said, Pastor Love, Representative Love, is when we start thinking about what we're going to do about the next election. This is November the 6th, I think, because I feel like I hadn't slept in 2 days. I'm sorry, I'm sitting over there and I'm going to sleep because last night was a sleepless night. But today is November the 6th, 2024. The next governor's election is 2026. We already in that 2 year. And so my thought is that tonight that we leave with a plan of action. I don't like coming and just talking. I have heard talk for the last few months. I haven't slept more than 4 hours for the last 6 months. And I just believe that if we're going to do anything that for 2026, it needs to start here tonight. So that doesn't mean that I want to be a part of the meeting, because I don't like to meet. But it does mean that we got to do something, and it needs to start here tonight.
I'll go to what Bishop Marble said. So, prime example. I may not be able to reach the residents of Cheatham or Casey or Napier the way that someone else can. But if someone else can reach them better than I can, right? I don't mind having the conversation with them about the power that they have, because you think about it, in order to live in Casey or Cheatham or Napier or Cumberland View, you cannot have had interaction with the criminal legal system. So automatically they can be registered to vote, right? So we don't think about things like that. Like if you live in an MBHA property, right, more than likely you don't have anything on your record. So if there's a group out there that can reach them, because I don't see myself as the superhero. I don't have to be the one who goes and registers the folks in those areas, but somebody can, right? And that's part of the planning for me, to find out who is it that can go to Napier, Tony Sudicum, right, Vine Hill, and get those persons registered and let them understand that they have power to transform the city, right? So to your point, so that when the governor's race comes around, Nashville really has enough votes to determine, if not who is going to be the governor, that the governor elected pays attention to Nashville, because the next time it may be more. I think that's how we build the power base up, is find those persons who can get in those spaces, and then I'll work with them to help educate and connect with them. But I think that's one way to start.
Okay. I probably didn't get my what my thoughts were good. No, you did real good. I like that. But my thoughts are that we have enough people registered to vote to do anything that we want to do right now. We just can't get them to the polls. So I believe that we have to do more than getting people registered. That conversation you're talking about is good. But we need to find somebody that we can stand behind, that we can feel that the city and that the state will say, years ago, Reverend Sanders, ran for governor. I was his campaign manager. And one of the things that people got mad at, they got mad at the fact that there was a man that had the nerve to run as an independent, and he was black. And they thought, oh my God, he's going to mess up. He's going to mess up the Democratic Party. They're not going to get this man into office because he's running. And because he was a Republican, everybody knew that, they felt like he was running to help the Republican Party, which he was not. He was sincere in that. And also, he did it because he wanted people to hear us. But he had more black people to talk about him, to belittle him, the same way I have heard for the last 4 months the name calling that they did to one of the brightest black, Asian, Indian woman in America. And every time they called her a name, they called me a name. They called the rest of us a name. I don't know if I could get a job here in Nashville if I was to leave Meharry, because I've been fighting on YouTube, I've been fighting on Facebook with these women that were talking about her. And I felt like I had to get in that fight. So I'm just saying that not only do we try to do something to get people registered to vote, we get people to understand what their vote means and to get them to get out and vote. But we need to find someone that we can stand behind and stop waiting for somebody else to jump up, or then waiting for those people that are not qualified to just jump in.
So, dear sister, I agree with you. I think that, for example, 2 years we are gearing up for a gubernatorial race. Also, this congressional seat that Mark Green just won is going to come back up. We don't have a representative representing us in D.C. And so the question becomes, who's running for governor? Who's going to run for Congress? And I hear you when you say, what's the plan? I think I'm too new to orchestrate the plan, but I can be a part of the plan. And I think that those of us who are sitting here tonight can pull some people together to begin to really think about what that plan is going to look like, what the plan is going to be.
Yeah.
Because we should know who's running for governor.
And well, I know who's running. No, Mark Green is going to run probably, and Mark Green is probably going to run for governor on the Republican side.
But that's on the Republican side. Who's going to run on the Democratic side?
I don't know that. We'll grab somebody.
That's the problem.
And that, I know, but let me be clear about this. The reason I said it like that is because I'm old enough to remember that in the McWhirter years, we rested on our laurels as a Democratic Party because we just naturally assumed that Tennessee was going to always be blue. We didn't have a bench. Then we ran Gore for vice president. Gore got elected. And we just naturally assumed that Gore was going to be president and that everybody in Tennessee was going to vote for Gore. If Gore had carried Tennessee, Florida wouldn't have mattered. And that became the downfall of the party. And after that, we started grabbing people. You run. Oh, you run. You run, right? We started throwing people out as sacrificial lambs just to have some on the ticket. But I digress on that. The reason I would bring up the Clarksville piece with Ronnie is because of the congressional piece. If we build from that base of a state house, you have the numbers. Like, for example, if you had 25,000 people to vote for Ronnie Glenn in Clarksville, that becomes a significant number for the congressional race. Now you got Clarksville with a committed 25,000, right, who's gonna vote in that congressional race. It offsets what's happening in the other counties in that district. And if you have someone in Davidson County that can get 85,000, right, or 100,000, then you've offset again those counties. So that's why I'm saying building from that bottom space there builds the plan.
Thank you. Oh. My name is Nicole. I live in a neighborhood community, and when you said something, Reverend Dr. Love, it really made me think. So I live one block over from Charles E. Davis Boulevard, and former teacher, now work for a nonprofit. And so we asked our families in Napier how they feel about the election the last couple of weeks. And it was really interesting to hear many of the families were like, well, it doesn't matter who's going to be in office. My life is still going to be the same. So when we talk about how do we empower our neighbors, I think about that often. I spend a lot of time helping with the transit referendum because every week I get a call, Ms. Nicole, can you take my child to McGavick High School? Because our families know it takes 2 hours and 19 minutes to get from Hermitage Avenue to McGavick Pike because the bus was taken away. Ms. Nicole, do you have $2 for the bus fare? And so there's this book called Crossing Broadway. I used to live in New York. I grew up here. After grad school, moved to the South Bronx to teach. And it was written during the Civil Rights time because people who lived in Washington Heights did not feel comfortable crossing Broadway. Crossing Lafayette is an issue. So many of our people of color in JCUC, my neighbors, I live on Claiborne, feel as if our neighborhood is a different city, a different country, where they don't feel like they can cross Lafayette. So when we talk about empowering them, I think we have to also talk about racial healing. I went through Be the Bridge, which is a really powerful racial healing cohort, and they have a curriculum for people of color. How do we tell our families to deconstruct white supremacy? Because I'm pulling off layers even in my early 40s. And I've done a lot of work. I've read a lot of books. I was at Jeremiah Tisby's talk a couple of weeks ago, and it was so empowering. I've heard him talk so many times. It was empowering for me to see a room mostly full of white Christians who are progressive. And I'm very privileged because I have a community of friends, black, white, and a large community of white progressive friends who do the work, who are deconstructing white supremacy, and who meet monthly and who talk about, we need to email this senator, we need to email this congressman. And I've stopped saying allies. I've been saying co-conspirators. I don't need someone to like my post on Facebook. I need you to show up at the Hill. And so I think as a person of faith, my dad was a pastor in North Nashville growing up, we have to tell our white brothers and sisters, white pastors, believers, this is what we need you to do. And also let people know what is being done. I'll end here. There is a group that's called, I've been to a couple of meetings, it's called NCURJ. It stands for National Churches Uniting for Racial Equity and Justice. This is a diverse group of people, a large amount of white churches who, like I said, know the racist laws and are going to the Hill, calling their senators. It is happening. A lot of people don't know it's happening, but it is happening. And Brentwood United Methodist Church has a race and faith ministry. That's another example. I'm not about always just saying, look what this white church is doing. This is what this white church is doing. But I also think for us to make momentum, we have to show people this is what this one white church is doing. This is what this church over here is doing. And this is what this black church is doing. And how can we come together? And how can we help empower the neighbors, those who live in public housing, who feel like their voices are not heard? There's trust fatigue. We had years of planning about Envision Napier Suticum. Was there a building built? No. So they don't want to vote because they feel like nothing's going to happen. So that's all. I could be here all day.
Is that David Young with that group? David Young.
With the Methodist Church?
Yeah, within.
The name of the group is called NCURJ. Yeah, NCURJ.
In fact, they're having a meeting tonight, a prayer vigil.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. I've been to a couple of church meetings, but yeah. N, the letter N, thank you. Cure, C-U-R-E, and then J. They have monthly meetings, and the next one I think is next month, but I didn't know about the prayer vigil, so thank you.
My name is Dwight Lewis, and I think it's good to think about upcoming elections, but we also need to think about January 20th, when Trump takes office, and what he may do, and to how we're going to be ready for that, and how we're going to stick together. There's a book I think we all should read called Defectors, D-E-F-E-C-T-O-R-S. And it's by a woman named Paola Ramos, R-A-M-O-S. And she talks about what you need to do when we have this type of person coming into office. I just want to read, before I sit down. You know, this morning when I woke up, I was really low and started thinking about the song, I'll Fly Away. But I perked up a little later when I got hold of it. An email that says, a black podcaster summed it up. It's a masterclass in white privilege. He can't say enough racist things to be a racist. He can't commit enough crimes to be a criminal. He can't fail enough times to be a failure. He can't say enough stupid things to be stupid. The idea of him overshadows any reality. The Christian savior who doesn't know the Bible, the adulterer who stars and steals from charities. It's the promise of the protection of whiteness he represents.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say part of what gives me hope, a number of things, but is that in 2000, that's why I'm thinking about the plan, right? In 2010, 2008, the Republican Party was in the same position. They had not controlled a lot of state houses, and they decided that they were going to set a goal to not try to get the presidency, but to control state houses, because state houses draw congressional lines. And they put a plan together, and they found races in heavily Democratic states where there was a razor-thin margin of victory, where people weren't voting, and it was 2,000 people showing up in the primary and 4,000 showing up in the general election. And what they did was they found those races, identified them, and then put a candidate in, right, and flooded that candidate with money. And what they did was they then got control of the state houses. That's exactly what happened here in Tennessee, right? The state house was flipped, and then the congressional lines were redrawn, and then you create this facade that the state is going a certain kind of way. And you're right, there are enough people who are registered who are just so beat down that they're like, you know, man, I cast my vote, it didn't count, I'm gonna go sit down. But I think part of our charge is to have those conversations and educate folks and talk about the goal to get, I'll be honest with you, as much as it hurt last night, for me, I woke up glad that we still had Ronnie Glenn and that we had District 60 still in the Democratic hold, right? I was with a takeaway of like, at least we didn't lose any seats in the House. Then looked across the country and said, oh, there are 2 black women in the United States Senate, right? And I started finding other pockets of things. Tulsa elected its first black mayor ever, right? And so that was part of my joy in waking up and saying, okay, I know what happened at this level, but I found some joy in other pockets. And I'm forced to do that so that I don't just focus on what is happening here and at the national. And I would encourage you to do that also, is find some of those pockets of joy where even though some things did not go right at another level, we have some reason to celebrate.
Thank you for that. Come to the mic. Thank you for that. But I think that one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that as we're navigating the days ahead, that those who are in positions of influence are listening to us. For example, who knew that the Tennessee State chair of the Democratic Party was a black man? Y'all may have known that. I had no idea. And I just had the highest ranking black woman in financial services in Nashville. And he never showed up. I know exactly who he is.
Who? Yeah.
He is the president of NBCSL.
Yeah?
That is all state legislators across the United States of America. He's their president.
And I understand. What I'm suggesting is that this guy who is the chair of the state party needs to be having conversations with all of us as we are looking to move this state. Say that again? He's on his way out the door.
Yeah, so to your point though, here's where our groups of concerned people can get the layout from Sister Tamika, right, about who gets to vote on the new chair come January, right? That we understand that, that we understand that every party, every county party gets votes, but also the legislature gets 2, the House and the Senate get 2, and that our influence needs to be leveraged with those people.
Yes, so right now, currently, the party chair is Hendra Oremus. He has served in that role for a couple of years. And the state executive committee is who elects the state party chair. So last year, when executive committee people, last election, when they were on the ballot, those are the people who choose the state party chair. So we have over 50 vacancies on the state party executive committee, and nobody even knows that you actually have to be on the ballot to get that seat in your county. There's an executive committee man, an executive committee woman. Vacancies across the state for years. Turmoil inside the state party. But we can change that and put us in a better position, because right now, nobody knows what goes on at the state party unless you're in roles like Representative Harold Love or myself, serving as a political director for a local union. I also serve as an executive committee person at large for this county party. So when we talk about who's engaged, when I came to the county party 7 years ago, the people who looked like me were on their way out the door. So I had to recruit more people who look like me to be on the county party, because it didn't look like the city that it didn't reflect the city that it represents at all. So if you know someone who would like to serve as an executive committee person, let us know so we can get them in the seat so they can, in January, then elect a new state party chair. We have the vice chair, who is out of Chattanooga, interested in the state party seat. So in Chattanooga, just looking for a role to come to Nashville, right? So she doesn't know anything about the landscape, hasn't raised a dollar for this state, but in position to be our state party chair. Nobody's challenging her. People have been asking folks for months, you gonna run? You gonna run? You think you wanna run? And everybody's like, no, I'm good. So nobody wants the job.
So those are conversations that I think we need to have. But let me say that when we were having conversations about the vice president coming here, the goal was to raise 1.5. She would not come unless we could raise 1.5 million for her. Kamala would not come. The problem was not necessarily her not coming because she needed the 1.5 million. The problem became the DNC refused to put money in this state.
Yeah.
Because the state hadn't been engaged since Al Gore.
Right.
So now when a Maxine Waters comes to the city, people are now beginning to scramble, and then Stacey Abrams then is coming, and then Pete Buttigieg is then coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then we become divided because now our resources are going in all different directions. And so my point is, I think that not only should we be looking at candidates, but we have to figure out how to get the party in line so that the party can get behind said candidate, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It does. And when we talk about dollars and resources with Maxine Waters, Vice President Kamala Harris, when we have candidates in this state and in this city who have to beg for dollars to run their races, people are not going to give because the candidates here need those resources. If Representative Harold Love ever gets opposed by somebody who really wants to challenge him, he's my representative. I have to give him my dollars. I can't worry about Maxine Waters. So when we talk about resources, we have to make sure that we're taking care of the people who represent us here first, because they struggle with money. How many emails you get last week asking you for $10, $25, $35? Can you help me with $40? 10 for 10, like, you know.
And I think that that is a valid point, that local candidates need to be funded also. But local candidates also have to have conversations about what they need. And then local candidates are always going to be local if they're not building relationships with folk who are on various levels. So, for example, Megan Berry stood in my office and said that she was struggling. Mm-hmm. That was Sunday. Monday afternoon, the DNC had sent her some money because Maxine picked up the phone and called. Mm-hmm. But if she had not been standing in my office, that would have never happened. And so what I'm pointing at is relationships.
Yeah. And I'm a relationship person. I am not transactional. Yeah. I will tell you, people are like, oh, SEIU ain't supporting the top labor candidate up here. I'm struggling. My seat is in danger. And I said, well, I've been in this role for 2 years and I ain't heard from you. Yeah. How you doing? Like, can we form a relationship? You want me to give you my memberships, hard-earned dollars, and you don't know who their political director is.
And see, for me, this is where the education also expands, because one thing that's oftentimes not understood is that there's a difference even for black and white candidates when it comes to fundraising.
Yeah.
Most black candidates at the state level don't have a general election opponent. We get primaried. And so as a result, the party doesn't get involved.
Oh, the bylaws say that they can't get involved. When there are 2 Democrats on the ballot, they got to stay out of it.
So you got an incumbent who isn't getting money from the party. Then, within the black community, and Councilwoman Holloway knows this, that raising money as a black candidate, we have to change the way that we view as black folks and white folks about giving to black candidates. We got to understand that a lot of us don't have the relationship with a lot of the labor unions, right? Mm-hmm. And so we can't call TEA, SEIU, AFL-CIO and say, listen, I got a primary, I need some money for my campaign. And they say, well, you know, it's primary, you can't get involved. And so what happens is you end up with African-American candidates who have a fundraising deficit. So as a result, when you have somebody that comes in, it's an education process for them. So I'm saying that I think this is what I'm putting all the bucket of education, right? Educating about what civics is, education about what it means to support black candidates, because it also frees up black candidates to be a little bit more vocal because they know the support is coming from you all. And when you're in your later years, you have more support, right? But when you're first starting out, your freshman year, it's hard to get folks to give to you, even if you're an incumbent. And so that's part of the education piece also that we can look at to help fundraise and help guide those conversations for those seeking office.
And we also have to teach black candidates that it's okay to ask for money. A lot of people from our communities don't want to ask Miss Salita Holloway for a donation or call David and ask if he can give a few dollars here, because it's something about that complex of, if we asking you for money, we begging, and black people don't like to beg, right? So the culture around fundraising needs to change for people who look like me. And if you want to get involved in a local county party, please let me know. We have elections just like Representative Harold Love, NashvilleDems.com. state party as well, tndp.com, and it's a button that says get involved so you can represent your district. Those elections are coming up, and it would be helpful if people, you all right up there? It would be helpful if people could, everyday people could start getting involved versus the usual suspects and the Joe Blows. We need more people who are from the everyday communities getting engaged.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Well, I got some, I'm gonna get with you today.
Okay.
My question was, my name is Sheila Doris, and I've been part of Nashville all my life, except when I moved to Illinois and came back. But I have a question about, let's think about the here and now. It is what it is. I have a question about, what about having the Black Caucus reach out to the president-elect with concerns from the church and ensuring the voices are heard?
So that's also one of the reasons why I woke up kind of mad this morning, because as Councilor Holloway pointed out, come December the 6th, right? We on November, come 1 month from now, I'm going to be sworn in as the president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. And part of my responsibility is going to be, right, to go and engage with the President of the United States about the issues that all of my members across the country are having and what concerns they have as state level officials. And I had this wonderful plan in my mind of how it was going to be 2 days ago, how it was going to be great to interact with the President of the United States and how it was going to be wonderful. And so I woke up not sad, but kind of like mad, like, I'll be dadgum when I become president. I got to go deal with the other president. But that's what we're looking forward to, is engaging. And we've been here before, because in his first term, our president had to make sure that we engage, because the truth of the matter is this: Thurgood Marshall College Fund still has to engage. United Negro College Fund still has to engage. NAFIO still has to engage. These are all the educational groups focused on HBCU. They still have to engage with the President of the United States and the Department of Education and his White House initial HBCU, because they still got a constituency that they got to protect and support. And so that's part of our got to get up, right? We had today to lament, but we got to get up, because tomorrow there's some folks that are depending upon us to show up and engage the work. And I think that's also where, as a community, we'll have to have some leeway for our leadership, because somebody has to go. Somebody's gonna have to go and talk to somebody to do it, and we got to be a bit more supportive when that somebody goes, or somebodies, right, go. And I mean, let's say, I'm not putting this on, let's say you get the call and say, you know what, we want you to serve on the White House initial HBCUs. It's the catch-22, like, do I go? Right, and then we got to be able to say she's one of ours, right? And as she tries to get some stuff done for all the HBCUs, but particularly for Meharry and Fisk and Lane and Lemoyne and Knoxville College, we got to understand that if she's standing next to somebody, right, taking a picture that she don't want to take, that it's because she's working in that capacity to help us. And that's what we also have to have education about what it means to be in that space. And I would also say this: there are plenty of boards and commissions where we need black folks and white folks who are in the same mindset to be on, that are open and vacant. And when you go before these state boards and commissions, you want to have somebody engaged in that process who is concerned about the thing you're concerned about. So that's your point. We that's what we're struggling with. The Black Caucus have to go talk after January.
I used to work for the in IT for the Department of Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And I know they get a lot of federal dollars, and I'm just curious what's going to happen to that, since Project 2025 is supposed to, eliminate?
Right. So that's where I think we also have to have the conversations, not just with Congressman Green, but also Congressman Rose, to let those two, and I think it's, and Ogles, right? We gotta have somebody gotta go had a conversation with them to let them know that these are our concerns, right? That we have some K through 12, but also higher ed institutions that we're concerned about in their districts, and we'd like for them to understand the gravity of the impact, and perhaps they can in that space make it known that it would not be in the interest of their constituents if it went away, and help them to go and have those conversations.
Okay.
And look, the president-elect is trying to distance himself from Project 2025, and let's hope that he does. With that being said, I think that you get more with honey than you do vinegar, and we have to figure out how to frame these conversations and go to have the conversations. Now, what we can't do is we cannot continue to be crab in the barrel and take sound bites and manipulate the sound bites as if, we are standing against each other. Got to figure out how to have a unified voice and how to make our position known. Rep. Love is and me. I'm a good Baptist. Good Baptist says in the church covenant that even when we disagree, that we'll make it a point to go with the going crowd. That's the Shane Scott remix.
I don't think we have that in ours.
Y'all don't have that in y'all. Whatever the bishop says goes.
That's right.
But my point is, sometimes, unity is not always about walking in step. It's about walking in the same direction. And our challenge right now, the challenge post yesterday, is how do we walk in the same direction? We have a governor's election coming up. We have a congressional election that's going to come up in 2 years. In 4 years, Donald J. Trump will have to run for re-election. Or he can't. You're right. And so, unless he changes it. And so my point is, in 4 years, we'll be back in another presidential election. And so what's our plan? We got a plan for this. It really is not 2 years. Yeah. So whoever's going to run for that congressional seat needs to start today.
Because that primary is in August, and so you're talking about you've already lost 3 months right there.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get early voting in there, so you already lost 4 months. Yeah.
This will be quick. I know we're at the end. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Malden Jones. I'm David's wife. But I'm also a professor of education, and I was working with some teachers, specifically in the Nashville area, well, surrounding Tennessee areas, who are really concerned about many of the issues that we already know is in his first 100-day plan, right? Like a lot of them have immigrant students who are worried about their families being deported, and then, of course, many of them are worried about the issues that I think we're all concerned about, particularly as Black people. And so we're talking about strategy, we're talking about politics, and all of that's very important. But this is still a very privileged conversation, which I'm noticing, right? That many of the teachers that I work with and the principals that I work with, they are smart, but they are not privy to a lot of these things. And so while we're talking about strategy and what we need to do next, I mean, what is the message to the congregations that you all serve? Like, what do we say next? We talk about resilience all the time. And that's important. It's a little old, right? Because I think black people are always called to be resilient. So what exactly are we telling congregations on Sunday, and then beyond that point, what exactly are we doing aside of the strategies, right? We need both.
I'm telling First Baptist Church Capitol Hill that it's time to re-engage. It's time for us to lead again. It's time for us to anoint candidates. It's time for us to surround ourselves around those who are in positions of power and influence. It's the black church, whether it's AME, whether it's Baptist, whether it's Pentecostal, whatever the black church is, the black church has a responsibility to be both priest and prophet. We have a responsibility to be gatekeepers. And there should be nothing that happens in this city without us. And so that's what I'm telling us. Now, the great thing about me having the ability to say this is that I don't owe anybody. I'm not bought. And so, while some of my colleagues might have to respond to some sense of a board, that's just not who I am.
I think what I try to say to Jefferson Street and to leaders within IMF is there has to be a deconstruction and reconstruction of what we find our values to really be. And that is, I think there's coalition building within our city with the black church and other organizations that sometimes theologically, historically, and culturally do not always align. However, many of our end goals are the same. And I think what I try to encourage Jefferson Street to do is to see the like-minded struggle of other groups and not shun, ignore, discriminate, oppress, or distance ourselves from other groups that are attempting to find liberation and justice for other people. That does not mean we silence or dilute what we need as a community and as people, but it does mean we might need to help champion, in some cases, the causes of others that historically we haven't.
I think it also goes back to civics. I think that as a church, as congregants, we need to educate everyone that we can touch. What Representative Love said earlier, he has to go and he has to talk to the new administration. And I know today is November 6th, whatever the date is today. And right now, no one wants to be bothered with the new administration. I get that. But when he goes up to Washington and he talks, we as a people can't say, oh man, they're sellouts. What's going on? Oh, why is he making... And that happens. A few months ago, I stood in that pulpit and I talked about how people should vote, and I said that everyone needs everyone hates a black prosecutor until they need a black prosecutor. It's the same concept, And so I think it goes back to civics. Let me also say this, because I do think that the black church is important. I just hope that we use discernment when we get behind these leaders. What Tamika said earlier with the party, the state party, that's a problem. That is a major problem where someone is in leadership and the only reason why they're in leadership is so they can come to Nashville. That's crazy. We need to hold the party and these institutions responsible. We need to challenge these institutions. I just don't want us to fall victim to always, following the carrot on the stick. And I think that's what we have done for years and years and years. And sometimes we have candidates who aren't qualified at all, and they come to church and they sit in the pew on Sunday, and then they can meet and shake hands, but they might not be good candidates. We don't see them anymore after that. So I think if we empower our members, people who aren't members, with civics. The Bible says that my people shall perish for the lack of knowledge, right? So when people sit in these pews and they don't know that in order to get money for the Thurgood Marshall Fund, Scholarship Fund, you have to go to Washington and do this. We have to know how these systems of government work. And I think if we empower them with knowledge, I think that, the church can influence and get behind a real candidate, but also, and it's no offense, but we have to be better than just, Meg the Stallion twerking for some votes, or social media influence, social media influencers, telling us who to vote for when there's no demand for policy behind it. We need actionable policy. And so I say all that to say this. I think that the church, we need to use discernment, and we need to teach people civics however we can. And I think we can get behind candidates who we know are going to actually be about the change. Instead of just saying hope and change, they're actually doing something about it. So
thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. We're going to pray our way out. I'm going to ask Bishop Marble to pray for us, and maybe we'll sleep better tonight. And if you go another night or two without sleeping well, ask your doctor for a Valium, and that'll help you. That'll help you a little bit. But I hope that tonight helped us to kind of talk through a little bit of where we are and where we're trying to go. And, listen, I don't want to revert to God will make a way, but what I will say is we've been here before. And as a people, we've navigated these days on many different occasions. And so let's pray and plan. Let's plan and pray. Bishop Marble.
Father, we thank you for this day, that even with its heaviness and its host of emotions, it still is a day that you've made. And so we find reasons to rejoice and lament. And Lord, we ask that you would help us to sit in our lament, that we not rush past our emotions or our feelings, that we not rush past the feeling of hopelessness and the feeling of lack of change. Lord, help us not rush past sensing our emotions, because you created us as beings to feel emotions. But Lord, I pray that our emotions are not in vain, and that the pain and anguish that we feel in this moment, that it would be emotive fuel for our next moment, that we would take the time to mourn, that we would take the time to wear the ashes, that we would take the time to wear our sackcloth, but that when this season of mourning is over, we would be committed to work that will help resist and bring about the necessary justice that your son taught and preached about. Lord, help us to be people that follow after your teaching, that don't just worship you, but follow you. Help not our hearts be hardened, for we will remember that in due season, if we don't give up, if we don't quit, if we don't stop, we will reap the harvest that you promised for us. Lord, I pray that as we leave this place, we would leave renewed, refreshed, and revived, and that you would disturb us until what we've discussed, we become active doers of. That you would assign us and give to us role and responsibility, opportunity and avenue to do our part in the work of justice. Help us not pass this responsibility along. Help us not to see it as somebody else's responsibility, but help us locate where we can put our effort towards the change that we desire to see. Pray, oh God, that the resources, the knowledge, the creativity, the collaboration, the ingenuity that's needed for this work would be ours. We pray that you would give us the grace that you gave the sons of Issachar to understand these times. Help guide the path of our feet and the work of our hands. We ask, oh God, that through your goodness and the grace of your Son and the gifts of the Spirit, you will continue to empower and endow us until you return. Keep us as we go to our next destinations. Bless this church and this pastor for their history, their legacy, but also their present and future. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Again, thank you for sharing. Those of you who have watched virtually, thank you for sharing.